Hey friends, thank you so much everyone who joined us for worship this morning on Zoom. I have to confess I started to ugly cry a little bit when I saw people's faces coming on before the first service. Is just such a gift to be able to be together as much as we possibly can. So thank you for joining us. Let us know any feedback you have on that. Today, I actually want to start just a series of short videos that'll go through this week on a really pressing need in my own life, and I assume it's becoming a need in others' lives as well. I need a new rule of life, and I bet you do too. Even if you already had one, the momentous changes that we're going through means it's time to take a fresh look. Now, what is a rule of life, you might be saying? Well, the Anglican Catechism, which is a great resource, says that a rule of life is a discipline by which I order my worship, work, and leisure as a pleasing sacrifice to God. Really, a rule of life, it's like a constellation of disciplines that give structure to my life, that intentionally order my desires to love God and love neighbor, and push back against the disorder of my distracted heart and mind. So, for example, I might desire to love my next door neighbor, but find myself struggling to follow through or make that practical. So my rule of life might include a line in the sand that says, I'm going to check in on my neighbor once a week. Broad, but it gives some focus to the kind of person I want to become. It's like a stake that keeps a tomato plant from tipping over under its own weight. Rules of life aren't just for establishing particularly religious habits, although they probably should include things like prayer and corporate worship. I've known people that included exercises, writing time, even how often they're intimate with their spouse in their rule of life. The question to ask is, what habits are going to open me to God's love for me and to God's love flowing through me? Because that's ultimately what this is all about, right? A rule of life isn't a set of tasks to perform. It's not meant to be a crushing burden. Spiritual disciplines aren't just meant to be hoops to jump through. They all assume that God is already working. They're like sails that we raise to catch the wind of the Spirit. They're just ways to remind us and open us to participate afresh in what's already true. Because a certain amount of structure actually gives us freedom to flourish. If we have no structure, we flounder in good intentions, or we become captive to the tyranny of what feels like it's most important instead of what is. Now, we all have patterns, rhythms, disciplines, rules of life that we naturally fall into, but now everything is upended, and it's a great time to re-examine what habits might we need to incorporate in our lives that would lead to flourishing, especially if this season goes on for weeks or even months. So throughout this week, I'm going to be sharing on 4 disciplines, which I think are crucial for a rule of life in the midst of isolation. So check back here each day this week. Leave your comments. I'd love to hear them. It is such a joy to be on the journey together. And I hope that by some of these videos and some of our conversation that comes about through them, that we can really spur one another on to realize God's love for us and to love one another well. Blessings.